Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah. And this week I think is very appropriate for the week that we're in. Of course, this is a week that we're just wanting to endure. Going to the store, probably saying, I'm not going there anymore. I'm tired of the music, and I know that Grandma got run over by a reindeer, but I really am not interested in that. So we have to get through these days, and I think that you're going to find maybe that this Torah portion is very prophetic when it comes to this week. And with that, let's just get right into it. We're going to be in Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 37. And these accounts are just going way too fast as we're walking through this. But it says that here is the history of Yaakov in verse 2. When Yosef was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock with his brothers. So, once again, like with Sarah. Sarah died, and then the Torah portion is Sarah lived, but then she died. And here we have, starts off about Yaakov, Jacob, living in the land, but the account we're going to read is about Joseph, of Joseph. So let's just kind of consider this thought that only that which is connected to covenant actions have eternal significance. Now, I've talked many times that this is a book that is, yes, it is a book of history, but it is a history of the covenant. So only that which pertains to the ongoing covenant is going to be recorded for us. Should that remind us that only what we do, it's like a pastor from years ago used to quote, and he did not have I don't think he had a concept of this idea of the covenant and the passing on and what I just said to you, but he said, in light of eternity, what does it matter? Are we focused today on covenant matters, on what we are doing for his kingdom, for being involved in that covenant moving from one generation to another? Because according to the way that I'm reading this, only that which we do for that is connected to the covenant will be what is truly recorded as important when the covenant is completed and established upon this earth. Now, why does it say that Joseph was 17 years old when he used to pasture the flock? Nothing is there by chance. Everything is there because of purpose. In Hebraic thought, going back as far as I've been able to find, I've taught about the bar mitzvah and how that is today. I have some problems with that. A child that's 12, 13 years old is not considered a man, in my opinion. But in Hebraic thought here of what the scripture, I believe, lines out eventually is that at age 19, a boy is brought to the age of responsibility. So the scripture is speaking this to, in my estimation, that Yosef is doing something that is beyond his years. Though he is in everyone's eyes, he is, as King James says, a lad or a boy. Now, this would also be that same translation. Could go over to the binding of Isaac. It says a lad. I did not go back and look at the exact Hebrew word there. But in this instance, he is doing something that is beyond his years. Is this in a way telling us that in raising our own children, that we should be pushing them beyond their years? There is a concept in our society today of helicopter parenting. It goes on, I've seen, to helicopter grandparenting also. it is the mama's basement generation. And I'm not judging anybody that is, finds themselves in a position, but what we see in society is more of a coddling to instead of pushing forward with our children. It's something I've taught many times that the greatest our job description as parents is that from birth we are responsible for working ourselves out of a job as soon as possible. It's very cute for a child to be sucking on a bottle. It is not cute when that child is 30 years old. Okay? It is cute when a child comes out of the bathroom and says, "I went potty." It is not cute when the same child is 30 years old and is still doing the same thing. Okay, especially if you're, standing in Walmart somewhere. All right, so we are introduced to this this dysfunction, this rivalry between these 12 boys and their, it is 4 mothers specifically. We see 3 now. But the 4 are 4 fathers and 4 mothers, as I usually say this. And the rivalry comes down to what is translated as a coat of many colors. Once again, maybe we have some difficulty in translations here. David Stern translates it as a long-sleeved robe. But of course, that would not make the movies and plays very well that have been done through the years. The coat of many colors. Now, I have no problem with the concept of it being many colors, but that's not the essence of it. It is a long-sleeved robe, and the word color there, that is translated colors, is actually a word that if we look at it's very seldom used outside. I think it's only used twice outside of this account of Yosef. And it is a robe that is, the root word is a fall. And there's not a lot that in my limited abilities in Hebrew could find out, except for a robe that would be the word here for robe is, we find that over in Exodus and Leviticus, regarding the priests. So, with our idea that everything is about covenant, everything's about the firstborn, and the covenant moving through the generations, this is a priestly garment. And therein lies the essence of the rivalry between Yosef and his brothers. That his father, Yaakov, had given him an expression of the fact that the firstborn blessing, the Melchizedek priesthood, if you would, is going to be in Joseph. It's going to be given to Joseph, bypassing all of the other children, including Judah. Very important, because Judah is the one that we would have, it's gone from, Reuben gave it away, and so it goes down. Judah's the next in line. Wait a minute, guys, none of us are in line anymore, because it has now been given by our Father, who has the responsibility to do that. It's been given to our brother Yosef. Now, we see here a concept. So, wait a minute. The robe, I'm going to call it the robe of the fallen. And I'm going to allow go back with this thing of a coat of many colors, is that today there is a move in society in general, specifically the United States, of racism. There are people that today see everything through race. They see everything through gender. And this has been a theme throughout the recent election in the United States, that everything must be misogynistic, it must be racist, it must be, all of these things where actually it may have just been competence, where maybe that was what people got a hold of. I'm not going to go into the politics of this, but the truth is that no matter what a race is, okay, I grew up with red and yellow, black and white. They are precious in His sight, but not really so precious in our sight unless they're of a specific color. And in, where I grew up in the South, that color was white, okay? Anybody that's grown up there knows. And by the way, racism is not something that is just a Southern issue. I have seen and still see today people that are from the North that are as much racist as anybody I ever knew in the South. So racism is not a geographic thing, it is a human thing. But we all, no matter who we are, no matter what color our skin is, we have something in common, and that is that we are all fallen. So this coat of many colors, this priestly coat of many colors that's being given to Yosef, who is a prophetic picture of Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant. And I don't have time to go into all of that teaching. I'm going to hit bits and pieces of it today. That it is Messiah who is given the coat of the priest in order that he may redeem the fallen of all colors. Now in verse 8, we see that because of this, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where he could not talk with them in a civil manner. Oh, how prophetic is this of the week that we are about to go into, the week of December 25th. That if you bring up the subject that you do not observe December 25th, your relatives, I've had this, in my own family, cannot even speak to you in a civil manner. This is a time of the year that separates people. Why? Because redeemers, those who have been called to redeem and to restore, are normally rejected. Go over, if you would, on your own to Exodus chapter 2, verse 14. And it says in those scriptures, it's about Moshe when he comes he has killed the Egyptian. The next day he comes to his brothers and they say, "Who made you an authority over us?" The one offering redemption was rejected. I mean, do we see this in the life of Yeshua? The one offering redemption is rejected. Do we see this in the lives of the disciples of Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul? Read the book of Fox's Book of Martyrs, which was modernized later on into Jesus Freaks. And you will find that if you have been rejected by your family members, if you've been rejected by your acquaintances, you've been rejected by people that you hang out with at work, whatever, if you've been made fun of, if you've been told that since you don't observe Christmas, you're a heathen, I got that one, remember? Don't be surprised. You're in good company, folks. You're in the company of those who have their names written in a book about the covenant. We're coming into Hanukkah. I'm not going to I don't have time to teach specifically on Hanukkah, but here's the take on Hanukkah. Hanukkah is about a people that were standing up for the covenant. Read about them. Hebrews chapter 12. I mean, this theme is all over. Moving on. Joseph is sent as a young lad beyond the responsibilities of someone his age to the hills of Ephraim. He is sent to a place called Shechem. This is the place of his meeting with this person is known traditionally as an area at the base of the Mount of Blessing. Those of you that have been there, there's a pizza shop right on that corner. So this is where that roundabout that goes into modern-day Nablus. You go to the right, you go to Itamar, you go to the left, you go to the Mount of Blessing. That's the area that this is known for. And he says this when asked, what are you doing? What are you looking for? He says these beautiful words, I'm looking for my brothers. Those are some of the most powerful words in all of Scripture. I am looking for my brothers. If we take that into the concept of Yeshua as Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant, and we go over to Matthew chapter 10, verse 6, Matthew chapter 15, verse 24, what does he say? He says, I have come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Okay, a lot of prophetic things going on there, but Yosef has gone to the hills of Ephraim looking for his brothers with a message that is upon his body, which is the coat, the long-sleeved robe, the robe of priesthood, and that his brothers are to come under let me use it like this, under his wings to be a part of the covenant moving on. Okay, he is to be the one who is responsible for, but the other brothers are to be connected to him and therefore also significant in that covenant moving forward through the generations. And we see in the next words here, and the events, and I'm hoping that you will have read this or going to read this on your own, but we see the personalities of the different boys beginning to come out. It is probable, in my estimation, that it was Simeon that said, let's kill him. The reason for that, we will see that later on, Yosef put Simeon in a prison cell by himself. Why? In order for him to start thinking through his actions and his words. Later on, we will see in the life of Yeshua that it is, that Simeon has some interesting things to say there. Now, with Yehuda, with Reuben, we see that Reuben, getting ahead of myself with Judah, but with Reuben we see him as a man of compromise that comes back later on and says, I was not thinking that things were going to work out this way, instead of standing up. So Reuben was actually given the opportunity to walk not in the office so much, because the office of the firstborn is now given to Joseph, but Reuben can still walk in some of the responsibility of that office, therefore redeeming himself. But instead, he walks as this one of compromise. We'll see that later on in the words given to Joseph, or given by Jacob unto Reuben at the end of this chapter. Now, in verse 43, or excuse me, in verse chapter, let's see, where are we at? Chapter 37, verse 34, it says, when after the boys came back, they've got this priestly garment that is now dipped in blood. Okay, the garment of the firstborn, the Redeemer, the priest, that was torn and dipped in blood. Does that maybe make you think about the garment of Yeshua, a seamless garment that was torn, that was given to the Gentile, to those that gambled for his garment? Actually, that's what it was, not torn, but this was a priestly garment that was dipped in blood. The reasoning that it was not torn, to go back and correct myself a little bit, is when Yaakov tore his robe. Remember the high priest in the day of Yeshua, he tore his robe, therefore, in a manner, breaking the covenant. He was stating, at the time of Yeshua, the high priest was saying that he is no longer qualified for that job. Well, we know from history he was never qualified for that job because he was not in the proper lineage for that job. It's another subject. And so when it says that, I will go down to my grave to my son mourning, and his father wept for him, was it only that he was weeping for his son, or was he weeping for the fact that he believed that he had failed in his job of handing the covenant down, the role of the firstborn, the covenant priesthood, handing it down to another generation? Was his mourning for that as much as his mourning for his son being killed? I'll let you work on that one later on. Now, in chapter 38, it is one of those chapters is like, what? But it's about Judah. Now, Judah, if Joseph is now been killed in the mind of Jacob, then let's go back to Judah being responsible now to carry on the covenant. That he would have probably been the next in line that his dad would have gone back to, but instead, because of his own shame regarding this the account here, that he did not stand up for his brother. Okay? Instead, he said, let's sell him. Which, by the way, is another prophetic image going to Yeshua with Judas. So because he did not stand up and protect his brother, protect the covenant and the one holding the covenant, what does he do? In shame, he leaves, isolates himself from the other brothers. Now you're going to have to follow me and think through what has happened through the years, in the last 2,000 years, with Judah. Not casting judgment here, this is just what the prophetic image is. That for the most part, over the last 1,700 plus years, Judah has become isolated. Go to societies. There's the Jewish section. Talk to people about, well, Judah is to be a light to the nations. Well, that, in my opinion, that has not been, though there is a covenant, though there is evidence of covenant, of course, but to say that modern day Judaism has been a light to the world to openly welcome others in, I think that's a stretch of the imagination. So Judah, instead, he isolates himself, and with Tamar, he, in a way, is bringing forth a different covenant. A covenant that is of his seed, but is through what would seem to be a prostitute. Again, I'm not going to get into all the weeds of this, but if you'll spend some time thinking this thing through, I think it answers a lot of questions. Now, in the end, though, we see that Yah himself is at work in this, because Tamar, if we go through the lineages, Tamar is actually in the lineage of Yeshua. Okay, fascinating story, fascinating study. That's not one that I spend a lot of time with. I just look at kind of the overall facts of what happened there. All right, let's go back to now with Joseph. Joseph is basically kidnapped into slavery. He is then sold into Egypt, and he rises to a place of prominence. Now, in order to understand this, we're going to go into history, and I know that through the years I've talked about this so many times that some of you can probably do it with my accent. But for the sake of the season that we're in this week, for the sake of a reminder, and maybe the ability to, as you're in situations, be able to explain what has happened in the last 2,000 years, I'm going to go back over this again. That Joseph is in Potiphar's house. He rises to a place of prominence for a time, but then comes in contact with a woman whose name is Potiphar's wife. Okay, we're not told what her name is. She just referred to as Potiphar's wife. Consider the writings of Shaul as he is going into the area of the Gentiles, of Hellenized Jews, of those that are in assimilation. We're looking at Corinth, Galatia, Ephesus, Philippi, various places that are on his journeys that he goes to. And so this message of Yeshua, I personally believe that he would have been speaking to these people, and eventually he would have been explaining to them through the Torah the ministry of Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant, and that would return as Mashiach ben David, the conquering king. That's just my opinion, but it kind of fits with the narrative. So during that time, the message of a people who are following Yeshua as Mashiach ben Yosef, and are also being taught to follow not the traditions of man, whether they be of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, or of pagan cultures of that day, that we see this message of Yeshua and obedience to the Torah rising to a place of prominence. But in the 2nd century, there's a man named Marcion who enters the picture. Now, Marcion is, in my opinion, in my belief, is pictured as is a prophetic fulfillment of, and is the shadow of, here in Potiphar's wife, a person that rips or tries to rip the Hebraic heritage from the early congregation, the early Kahal. Marcion is a man who he was the first Gentile. I know I'm repeating myself for many years. He is the first Gentile of the early congregation in Jerusalem, the early Kahal in Jerusalem. He comes in a very anti-Semitic time, and he himself is let's put it in different terms, he is a hater of the Jews. He has, because of this, he comes with this message that he has formulated in his own mind, that there are two gods. The God of the Old Testament, who is judgmental, the God of the New Testament, who is lovey-dovey. And the God of the New Testament, as is brought forth in the person of quote-unquote Jesus, has now overcome the God of the Old Testament, that judgmental one. This new God in the person of Jesus is now full of grace and mercy and doesn't really care about anything that you do. He also said that the quote-unquote Old Testament was done away with. He then takes the quote-unquote New Testament and starts to take apart everything that has anything good to say about the Jews. His own Bible comes down to basically parts of the Gospels and the writings of Paul. Herein lies the historic basis, the root of, but Paul said. It's all right there, folks. So I would say that the ghost of Marcion, to quote can't remember his name, so I'll just say an acquaintance of mine, the ghost of Marcion is still alive and well in modern day Christianity. In fact, Marcion is the driving force today of Christianity. Potiphar, going back to it, the book of Jasher says that Potiphar knew that his wife was lying, that she had told a falsehood regarding Joseph. Enter in, Constantine is the fulfillment of the shadow, which is Potiphar. Constantine knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that what he was doing in mixing the pagan practices of that day, which brings forth Christmas, Easter, I could dare say sets up the later traditions of the of Valentine's Day, of Halloween, of all of these things. It all comes back to this mixture that Constantine introduced into and is now what is known to us as the Catholic Church. Okay, nothing, why am I saying this again? Because when it comes to this season, people get, it's a difficult season for all of us. I got that. But it's a season that we should understand that the Almighty, this did not take him by surprise. That he prophesied that all of these things would come to pass. And we are in the days of the fulfillment of all things. Now, in the end, Constantine would put the world into what? The Dark Ages. Yes. On the other hand, Potiphar would throw Joseph into what? A prison, a place of darkness. The similarities between Marcion, Constantine, and what has happened in the world over the last 1700 years plus is just beyond what someone would call coincidence. In fact, it is, in my estimation, absolutely prophesied. Now we see Joseph as he is in the tomb, as Joseph is in the place of darkness. This is prophetic of Yeshua being placed in a tomb. And what gives us a ray of hope in all of this is the wording that says, on the third day. Now, this is where we begin to see the cupbearer and the baker, which I'll probably get into more. Well, let me go ahead and go here now since I have time. Again, I know that I'm repeating myself through the years. The cupbearer and baker are also prophesied, or a prophecy of a person, I believe, that would enter into the world. I have said this, I have taught this in many places, and for the most part, I've had blank stares from people. That has not caused me to quit speaking this or teaching this, because I believe it to be true and is one of the greatest faith builders that I know, for personally in my own life, that I rely on regarding our work that we're trying to do in moving forward with restoration. And that is, the cupbearer and the baker relate to the person of Martin Luther. How Martin Luther comes on the scene. He tacks his thesis on the Wittenberg Castle Church and says, the just shall live by faith. Okay? He takes then his gospel, though he is belittled by, persecuted by religion of that day, once again fulfilling an aspect of Joseph's life. But when he goes to the Jews with a gospel that's void of the Torah, they reject him. He then writes scathing things regarding the Jews because he does not understand his position in life, of his position of restoration, which I would dare say is imperative that you and I understand where we are and what our job is in restoration. Because if we don't understand that, then we will go into an area we're not called to, and then possibly do more destruction than good, which is what Martin Luther's life ended up being, as Hitler actually used the writings of Martin Luther in going forth with the Shoah, the Holocaust. And 6 million Jews lost their lives due to the writings of Martin Luther. All right, moving on. So, the cupbearer, of course, has a cup. He has wine. He is to taste that wine, and if he doesn't die, then he gives it to the king, and the wine is good. The baker, on the other hand, is the one who is in charge of bringing forth the bread of life unto the king. So these two have been thrown in prison, find themselves there in the Dark Ages with Yosef. I hope you're thinking about all the intricacies of this, that Martin Luther was introduced to the world during the Dark Ages and was part of Joseph coming forth, was part of those of faith coming forth in the beginning of a restoration. Okay? Denominational Christianity was not the end result, which is the downfall, but was the beginning of a restoration. So the cupbearer has wine, which speaks of life, speaks of blood, grace. The blood that was shed on the altar, okay, was for the life of Israel, the forgiveness of sins. The just shall live by faith, all coming together here. But Martin Luther, though he accepted that the blood that was shed, he then rejected the Torah. Therefore, continuing in the words of in the anti-Semitism, the Jew hatred of Marcion. That is here pictured in the cupbearer and the baker. To me, it's beyond comprehension to me that the Almighty gave such an amazing picture of what would happen and the restoration that he would one day bring forth. And for the most part, the majority of people that I've talked to through the years have really kind of given me a glassy-eyed look regarding this. That's okay. Now, the work of restoration begins with the cupbearer and the baker. Though it will take a period now of 2 years for Joseph to come forth, all right, it is still begun. And it says, on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a party for all the officials, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among the officials. In the third day, a restoration began, but it would not be seen for another 2 years. And nothing is here by accident. And so this third day, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 and 12, we see that the earth began to bring forth fruit. It was a time of fruit bearing. It was a time it talks about the grasses and the trees. And it was actually prior to, and this, you got to kind of think about this one, that when the earth began to be fruitful, light was, but it wasn't put into anywhere yet. I don't need to go there in my own mind today. I'll totally get sidetracked. So this is about fruitfulness. The third day is about fruitfulness. In Genesis chapter 22, verse 4, it is the account of Abraham with Isaac, who looks up to Mount Moriah and says it says on the third day he looked up and he saw the place. He saw Mount Moriah. He saw the Temple Mount. He saw the sheen in the valleys. He said to the servants, "You guys sit here. Me and my son are going to go to the mountain, and we will return." So it is in the third day there will be a realization, a vision of the kingdom will be brought forth. In Hosea chapter 6, speaking to specifically the northern kingdom of Ephraim, it says in Hosea 6:1, "Come, let us return to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh." Okay? Let us make teshuvah. Let us turn from our ways and unto his ways, for he is torn and he will heal us. He is struck and he will bind our wounds. After 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will raise us up, and we will live in the presence of what Abraham saw on the third day. That's my addition right there, just to keep with the theme. In Luke chapter 13, let's go all the way over to there. This is, okay, I got to get my page turning here. Didn't mark this one. I did with Hosea because I wanted to get there a little faster. In Luke chapter 13, this is the words of Yeshua. We're going to go to verse 32, and it says, and he said to them, you can read the context on your own, he said to them, "Go tell that fox, Herod," right? Let's just go back a verse. "Just at that moment, some of the Pharisees came to him, the religious leaders came to him and said to Yeshua, "Get out and go away from here, because Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go tell that fox, pay attention, today and tomorrow," 2 days, I am driving out demons, healing people, and on the third day I will reach my goal. What is the goal of Yeshua? Redemption. The return as Mashiach ben David. Question is, when does that third day begin? People say today, well, I just want to go back to the book of Acts. Okay? Well, why would we want to go back to the book of Acts? Because if the Almighty goes forward in what he is doing today or in that day will be greater than what he did before. I mean, he doesn't just settle for doing what he did. He does something of greater significance. And maybe it has nothing to do with numbers, it's of significance. And the greatest thing of significance will be to bring upon this world his kingdom. So when does that day begin? I don't know. That's a problem. I don't know. But if we look back to the time of Messiah, if we consider the days of creation, the 6 days of creation, the seventh day, a millennial kingdom reign, it all begins to point to a time. We just don't know when that time will be. For 2,000 years, people have been prophesying about that time, and it's apparent to me that they've gotten it wrong. But that does not mean that that time will not be. And is it possible that you and I will be in that time? I don't know. What I can tell you is this, is that we need to understand the ramifications to us. That if we are in that time, then we need to be working as Jacob was. We need to be working as Joseph was. We need to be working toward that kingdom and covenant being established. Now, behind me, I got pointed the right direction that time. Behind me is a sign that I've got to, when I finish up, and I'm waiting for some warm weather, because I got some stuff that's got to be done before I finish all this behind me, God willing. And my carpentry skills get a little bit better. They've been lax over the years. But this sign that I have says, "Dreams don't work unless you do." Well, is that true? Is that actually a true statement? That dreams don't work unless we do? Well, we see Joseph in a prison for a number of years. We'll get into that probably a little bit later on. But we see him in prison with a dream. And there's no evidence of that dream coming forth. Does that mean that the dream is dead? Does that mean that the Almighty is not working in bringing forth his dream? Does that mean that Joseph did nothing in that time in the prison cell to bring that dream forth? These are all things that are kind of speculative because I have no verses regarding this, but I know this. The Almighty has a dream, and he's going to bring it to pass. And there has not been a day for the last 6,000 years or a night for the last 6,000 years that he has not worked toward that dream. And you and I are caught up in the realization of his dream being brought forth. So what are we doing in our day to help in our part of that dream being brought forth? That's a personal question. And that's a question that each of us has to answer for ourselves. So with that, Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom. I pray you have a blessed, prosperous week, and the beginning of Hanukkah coming up this Wednesday night. I think it's Wednesday night we begin Hanukkah, and so looking forward to that. Wish you guys a very, what is Hanukkah about? It's about that dream coming forth. It's about the fulfillment. It's about people that were committed to the covenant going forth. Let's treat it like that, and not just with the fluff that it is turned into in the United States and other places. All right. So with that, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, see you again next week. And until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha Shalom.